Hey, thanks for tuning in to Twang and Bang. About 2 years ago, my friends at Bravo Company sent me a knife that was different than any I'd used before. One with a heavily angled blade with this giant finger guard that was designed to be the non-knife fighter's defensive knife. Turns out it fit my defensive style really well, one that's a generalist philosophy that I learned over many decades of studying various martial arts. But because of knife carry laws, it was completely impractical for me to carry. I couldn't legally conceal it, and because I keep my shirts untucked specifically to conceal a firearm, I couldn't open carry it either. Luckily, I wasn't the only one that had to leave my Colonel blade at home while clipping something else into my pocket, and that's why they now have their new folder. When open, it offers all the advantages of the Colonel blade fixed knives. When closed, it offers pocket clip carry that's more convenient for those of us that don't wear a plate carrier or duty belt all day, while offering a form factor that's a lot more compliant with knife carry laws. For all the reasons that I love the original Colonel blade, this is now my everyday carry. And that's why is what's coming up next on Twang and Bang. The Colonel Folder is the first folding knife from Colonel Blades, maker of a line of defensive knives with a blade angle to take advantage of techniques you already know. It's made by Fox Knives of Italy, a NATO-approved knife manufacturer highly regarded by police and military units around the world. The black G10 scales have a very coarse texture that allows great retention even when wet. The smooth pocket clip is oriented for tip-up carry and is reversible. On one side, it's impossible to miss the large release button for closing the blade. On the other, you might have to look a little harder to see the safety that keeps the blade locked no matter how hard you might be gripping the handle. What sets the Colonel Folder apart from other folders is the large finger guard, which protrudes from the back of the knife when folded. The inside and outside of the loop are radiused and polished to prevent discomfort or injury to your finger. Opening the Colonel reveals an N690 CO blade hardened to a 5860 Rockwell. Though it looks like a dual-edged blade, only the bottom edge is sharpened from the factory to comply with knife carry laws. This blade has the satin finish, though the Colonel Folder is also available with a black ceramic blade finish. The finger guard isn't the only clue to this knife's unconventional use. Its blade angles nearly 90 degrees towards the handle, lowering the point to extend in front of a clenched fist. This design is what makes all Colonel blades easier to use for personal defense than any other knives I'm aware of. The Colonel Folder might look like a button lock knife, but in fact, it uses a liner lock. Because the finger guard ends up where you'd ordinarily access the locking spring to close the knife, you have this beefy button on the opposite side of the spring. Here's what a liner lock typically looks like. You can see the locking spring bends inward inside the liner, and that blocks the blade from closing until you reach in there with your thumb and just push it out of the way. And now you can close the blade. With the Colonel Folder, you can't do that. However, if you look inside, you can see the spring coming in from the liner that blocks the blade from closing. I press this button, which is a spring of its own, and it goes across the inside, pushes the liner lock out of the way, and then it unlocks the blade just enough to hold that spring open. You then have to release the button to close the blade all the way. This could be seen as a bit of a safety system. You really have to depress this button to unintentionally unlock the blade. I can't even demonstrate it in any kind of grip. I cannot unlock the blade to even show you. Well, there goes that. Like, it's still locked. But let's imagine that you have really pointy fingers and you are able to unintentionally press that down. You still aren't going to have that chop your fingers off because that button's in the way. And you're going to feel that to where you can just push your finger out and now it's locked again. Plus, as long as you have a finger through the ring, your finger's going to act as a blade stop. It probably wouldn't feel very good stabbing something with resistance with the blade unlocked, but the inside of the ring is radiused nicely, and clearly bruising one finger is better than having a blade close on 3 or 4 of them. I want to point out that I am really reaching here and trying to figure out how things could go wrong, but Clearly, Colonel Blades did the same thing and designed extra layers of safety into this folder. Speaking of safety, on the other side you'll find an actual safety that holds the spring in the lock position. It only works when the knife is open because it takes up space made only when the blade is out of the way of the locking spring. I think as I've demonstrated, no matter how I've held this, I'm going to take the safety off, I have not come close to accidentally depressing the button and unlocking the blade. But if you knew you were going to have it open for a while, especially if you're going to hold it in a grip other than its standard grip, it's there to give you added peace of mind. Though it's small, it doesn't require fine motor skill to actuate. You just sweep your finger down the side of the scale and it pushes the safety into position. I don't suspect you're going to open the knife and flick that safety in a defensive situation. But I think, as I've shown, I really don't see how that's going to be needed, especially if you're holding it in a defensive grip. The protruding finger guard does present a few challenges that other knives this size don't have. First, it simply won't fit into the knife pocket of my favorite pants. This, of course, is easily solved by carrying it in another pocket. However, this then introduces the possibility that some of your other pocket contents might find their way through the finger guard, which could also delay deployment in a defensive situation. I think you just need to be mindful of where you put your keys or your pens, and it shouldn't be a problem. That protruding finger guard also makes the kernel folder super fast to open without the need for any assist mechanism. Of course, you can use it to defend yourself in the grip that you would have as soon as you would open it, but it's really designed around holding it in your fist with your finger through the finger guard. This is where form meets function for the kernel folder, just like with all kernel blades. This is the non-knife fighter's fighting knife, which for a generalist like myself makes this knife exactly the kind of knife that I want to carry for personal protection. You don't have to learn and practice any special techniques that only work for this knife. The techniques you already know, in fact, a lot of the movements you do in an ordinary day are all you need to know to effectively use the kernel knife for personal protection. If you can throw a punch, you can defend yourself with the kernel. Straight punch, uppercut, right hook, jab. All these techniques from every form of boxing and martial art have already taught you how to use the kernel. Not a boxer or martial artist? If you know how to point, you know how to use the kernel. In fact, if you just have the kernel in your hand and you do whatever is natural to you to get somebody away from you, the kernel will work. You can't say that about most knives that promote themselves for defensive use. You don't need to bend your wrist in order to lead with the tip like you do with a straight knife. This angle is not only the most natural wrist angle, it's also your strongest. If you hit something hard when thrusting with a straight knife, all that force is going to push the entire knife through your hand. It's basically friction and whatever finger grooves there are keeping the handle in your hand at that point. If you hit something hard with the kernel folder, it's just going to push the grip right into the meaty part of your palm. Any torque on the blade you can counter with the full grip strength of all four fingers. Yeah, all that texture on the G10 scales is really nice, but you don't depend on friction alone to keep control of the kernel folder. Here's where I need to sanitize something that got my video on the original kernel flagged, but it's an important feature I don't want to leave out, so bear with me. This loop isn't just going to protect your finger when using the kernel blade. It's not just going to give you more leverage over the blade itself. It's also going to direct the material you're cutting into the edge. That's going to make cutting through strong elastic sheets both faster and easier. This isn't just a fighting knife. It also works really well for everyday tasks such as opening boxes and cutting cord. Really, it's super unlikely that I'm actually going to need to defend myself with a knife. But I use my EDC knife constantly as a tool. The same knife angle that makes the kernel folder such a great defensive knife also makes it a great utility knife. By the way, if you're worried that your defensive knife will get ruined opening boxes, get a new knife. The irony with a video on a knife like this is because it doesn't have its own defensive techniques, I don't have a lot of fancy bullshito to show off in a video. The kernel folder sits in your hand and lets your instincts do the rest. That's why I've been such an advocate for their fixed blade knives for the past 2 years. The folder is just a no-brainer for me for becoming my everyday carry knife. It handles all of my daily knife needs with ease, just like all the high quality folders I've been carrying over the years, but If I ever did find myself in the dire position where I would need a knife to defend myself, I can't think of anything that I'd rather clip to my pocket than this. And I'm saying that knowing that some of you might watch this video and end up buying this knife as a result, and that this might be the thing that you need to rely upon to defend yourself. There are lots of knives that can get the job done, but I honestly feel that this knife will give you the best probability of success. The Colonel Folder MSRPs for just under $160. That's for the satin as well as the black finished blade. You can find it at colonelblades.com. Be sure to follow me on Facebook and Instagram. You can see the links right here. Be sure to sign up for my mailing list. It's the only way to stay in touch with me no matter what happens to my channel here on YouTube. I really appreciate you watching Twang and Bang, and hope to see you next time.